Yeah, be prepared for some long, boring boss fights if you don't have your weapons upgraded. Wow, I didn't think today's Ancient DOS game was that obscure, but apparently it stumped all of you, and that game is Highway Hunter. It is a very simple but incredibly fast-paced and difficult 2D shooter that takes place on the road rather than in space. Kinda like Spy Hunter and Action Fighter. Wait a minute, Spy Hunter? Highway Hunter? Don't know if that's a coincidence or not. Whatever. The point is, it's a highly underrated game and deserves a look, so let's start things off as usual with the game stats. Highway Hunter was created by the Russian development team Omega Integral Systems and published by Safari Software in 1994. It's a one-player vertical 2D shooter with support for VGA 320x200 256 color graphics and Sound Blaster sound. As for its current release date, it's still commercial, and finding a copy of the original Safari Software release is next to impossible, though it's not hard to find the boxed copy released by Monkey Business, though I don't actually know if that's the full game or not, and the entire internet is completely devoid of any information about it. You see, Monkey Business was part of a larger company called the B&N Companies, and they had a tendency to release boxed copies of only bits and pieces of games that were originally published by Epic and Safari, rather than boxed copies of the full complete games. But some games like Overkill were complete, and the boxes themselves never say anything about this stuff. So I just have no idea. If anyone has any info on this, please let me know and I'll post the details below this video on my website. If you do want to take a chance on this particular boxed copy, it usually runs $10 to $20. All that said, I was able to find a way to send an email to the game's original designer, Alexander Safonov, and I asked if perhaps he could sanction a freeware release of this game, but I haven't heard anything back yet. Still, you never know, so if I do hear anything, I'll definitely give you guys all the details. Now, before we get to the story of this game, there's an interesting piece of trivia I want to share. Before Highway Hunter was picked up and published by Safari, the game was a lot rougher around the edges, was called Highway Fighter as opposed to Hunter, and OIS was trying to market the game themselves rather than going through a shareware publisher. As far as I can figure out, this earlier version is essentially the same game, but with some different graphics, no mouse support, and an even harder level of difficulty than Highway Hunter, not to mention a completely different story. I don't know what the story is in Highway Fighter, but in Highway Hunter, the story is that at some point in the future, the Axis of Allied Planets takes over Earth and installs special terraformers to make life here more hospitable for various alien races, with the unfortunate side effect of slowly killing off all human life on the planet. You take the role of Unit 1-6247, a human who's been taken prisoner and forced to work on a special vehicle known as the Multi-Attack Super Turbo Energy Ranger, aka Master, which is going to be used to annihilate any further human resistance. Seeing an opportunity to escape, you climb in the Master, drive right through the prison barricades, and begin your quest to destroy the terraformers and save the human race from destruction. Now before you begin playing, there's a couple options of note. First of all, you can choose to control the Master with the keyboard, joystick, or mouse. I highly recommend mouse control, because the keyboard and joystick controls simply don't offer the precision you're going to need to survive. In this game, single pixels can mean the difference between life or death. You also need to choose your difficulty level, which, believe it or not, has absolutely no effect on how much damage you do or how difficult the enemies are. Instead, the difficulty selection fundamentally changes how the game is played. Easy and medium skill are actually identical, with one very important exception. On easy skill, the road boundaries simply block you. On medium skill, they cause damage. This means when you're playing on medium, you have to be very careful not to drive too far to anyone's side and to pay attention to the shape of the road, whereas on easy, you don't have to worry about this in the slightest. Hard skill changes things up considerably. First of all, you can still take damage from touching the edges of the road, and you get a little more weapon energy than you normally would from weapon upgrades. But instead of an energy gauge which simply decreases when you take damage, you get a lives counter instead, and a single hit kills you, forcing your weapons back down to their weakest level. And speaking of the weapons in this game, they are kind of neat, and they're highly varied too. You start off with the V laser, which I think stands for vertical laser. In any case, it's as basic as it gets, and you get unlimited ammo with it. Your first upgrade gets you the W laser, which I think stands for wide laser, and it's essentially two lasers fired side by side, giving you twice the firepower, and again, doesn't burn any energy. Next up are the W missiles, which do burn energy, but also do twice as much damage as the W laser. So once you get up at least this high, you have to start conserving your firepower when you can, as the more shots you take, the more energy you lose. And if you run out, you downgrade to the previous weapon system. Next up is the W combo, which fires a single missile along with two laser pulses on either side. Next is the Flasher, which is just like the W combo, but replaces the missiles with a rapid-fire flamethrower that does pretty good damage. Next is the Ion Gun, which shoots two small but powerful pulses of energy straight forwards, as well as a couple diagonally, which really helps for hitting targets that aren't directly in front of you. Next is the Ion Combo, which adds a forward-firing missile to the mix. Next is the P laser, which either stands for plasma or power, I'm not quite sure which, but it fires an incredibly powerful beam that cuts right through everything. But it also burns an extremely large amount of energy, which makes it difficult to upgrade to the final weapon, the M laser, which almost certainly stands for Mega Laser. This fires a single missile forwards along with two massive laser pulses on either side, which do considerable amounts of damage. While this weapon does less overall damage than the previous one, it is much easier to hit things with and doesn't burn insane amounts of energy. You also come across power-ups along the way. The green U power-ups upgrade your weapons. The red C power-ups clear the screen of all weak hostiles and shots and do considerable damage to the stronger targets. The blue O power-up makes you invulnerable for a few seconds, though I have no idea what the O could possibly stand for as far as invulnerability is concerned, but whatever. Lastly, you can find miniature versions of your master with red outlines. These give you 3 additional energy points on easy and medium skill, and an extra life on hard skill. You also get an extra energy or life point whenever you cross a 100,000 score mark. And I say it that way because if you exactly hit a multiple of 100,000 points, it doesn't count. I.e., if you hit 400,000 points exactly, you don't get any extra energy, but once you hit 400,001 points, you do. The rest of the power-ups are special shields you can pick up. Now, the various shield systems are time limited, but can really help keep you safe against the various things flying at you. The most basic shield protects your front side and can also be rammed into ground targets to cause serious damage. The spinning shield isn't very good at stopping bullets, but can cause damage to both ground and air targets. The ring shield projects a deadly ring that can easily damage ground targets and can be extended forwards by holding the fire button down. The diamond shield waves back and forth in front of you and otherwise functions very much like the spinning shield. The side shields, however, I don't think they were ever programmed properly because they don't seem to do anything at all. So unless you have no choice, you're probably going to want to avoid that one. Now, that's really all there is to the game, and it's not very long either. You can typically beat it in about 45 minutes once you're an expert at it. But because of how challenging it is, I do have some tips to help you survive. And the biggest tip I could possibly give you is to conserve your weapon energy. Once you're up to the W missiles, start using the shields you get to damage your opponent so that you can upgrade to the more powerful weapons faster. But don't use your shields exclusively because you only get points for destroying stuff if it's destroyed by your weapons. My second biggest tip is that you're far more likely to get killed from the sides than you are from the front. Now, this is because your weapons make it incredibly difficult for anything to hit you from a front aspect, and there is not a single thing in this game that will creep up from behind. So chances are, if you take damage or get killed, it was due to something that either shot you from the sides or from something that was already beside you and then you ran sideways into it. To avoid this kind of situation, you have to keep in mind that the enemies always shoot towards where you are and not where you're going to be. So if you're moving when an enemy fires at you, don't go back the way you came, otherwise you're likely to fly straight into their shot. Finally, pretty much all of the 15 bosses in this game have firing patterns you can take advantage of to stay safe, even when fighting with nothing more than a V-laser. Trust me when I say, every level in this game is possible to win if you start with minimal weapons, but I'm not gonna lie, going that route can be incredibly difficult, so sometimes it's better to just bite the bullet and start the game over again from the first level. And yeah, that's Highway Hunter. It's kind of a shame that this game fell into obscurity as much as it has because it's fun, it's highly underrated, it's intense, and it offers a true selection of difficulty that is far more dynamic than simply messing with hit points and damage levels. Definitely worth a try at least once. Dosbox settings are kinda simple. Because of the way the timing works in-game, and the fact that you can adjust the speed of the game from within, I recommend setting a fixed cycles count of about 6,000. Also, even though I recommended using the mouse controls, if you do want to use a joystick or gamepad, this is one of the very few games where you have to leave timed intervals on. Yeah, if you turn timed intervals off, the joystick controls don't work properly. It's very strange like that, since as far as Dosbox is concerned, problems with timed intervals are usually the other way around. Anywho, that's all for this episode of Ancient DOS Games. Next time on episode 68, we're going to take a look at a game with tribbles in it. No, I am not kidding. If you think you know which game it is, then send your guess to ADG@pixelships.com and tune in next Saturday so that I can prove that this game really exists.